Hey guys, what is up? SuperKmanrocks here, and we're here for the LEC Semifinals overview and analysis video. Incredibly excited to get into this one. It's coming out a little bit later than I would want it to, and spoiler alert, the finals have actually already happened by the time this video is going to go up. You guys know that because you watch the videos on time, you always do, but I do apologize for that. Some real life stuff got in the way a little bit, and this had to get delayed a couple of hours, which is a little bit unfortunate, but I am getting these videos out. The semifinals video obviously is out today as you're watching this, and then the finals video will be out tomorrow, but this is a really interesting matchup. Two teams that I don't think a lot of people expected to be facing off against each other. One, because I think some people just saw them as the best team in the entire league, and the other because some people saw them as a team that didn't even deserve to be into the top 8, but here we are. It's definitely an interesting path for both of them. But before we jump into it, of course, let me know down in the comment section below what you guys thought of this series. How did you, think it was going to go, and did it go to your expectations? I'd love to know you guys' thoughts and opinions down below. Of course, if you want to know how we got here, linked up in the iCard right now is going to be a playlist of every single LEC video that I've made across Spring Split so far, every single regular season week, every single group stage game, and then also both of the first round series are going to be covered in that playlist. You can go ahead and check those out if you want my full breakdown of the LEC teams and of these two teams and kind of how they got here, but I'll give you a little bit of a preview now. It's time to talk about the semifinals. The winner's going to be moving on to the finals. The loser will be out, and of course, the winner of this tournament goes to MSI, so definitely a lot to play for here. We had a matchup between the number 4 seeded Team Vitality and the number 8 seeded Mad Lions. Certainly an intriguing matchup that I think definitely was a little bit unexpected, at the very least, to see in this spot. Vitality, maybe not so unexpected to see here. They've been one of the most talented teams in the entire league all year long. They weren't able to get it done in winter. They really collapsed in group stage, but it feels like they put it together a lot more in spring than they did in winter. The addition of Upset does seem to have stabilized a lot of their bot lane worries. And when Bo plays well, they win. Like, that's what happened when they were in group stage. Bo played really well, and they were able to get out of that group in first place without dropping a single game. But, again, when Bo doesn't play well, this team can be very hit or miss. We didn't see him play all that well against BDS, and that's why he's here in the semifinals, and that's why BDS has already made their way to the finals. But for Mad Lions on the other side, this is a team that everybody wrote off. Everybody was so mad because they were going to lead the league in championship points, basically no matter what, and, quote-unquote, they had already locked their place at MSI without ever actually having to win a game. Well, joke's on you guys, they're now in the semifinals. I know they weren't all that great in the regular season. They were really solid in the back half of the group stage. That win against Fnatic, as questionable as that Game 3 was, they were able to get it done, and then they were just the better team out of them and Astralis to be able to get here. And then, obviously, that series against G2 in round number 1, they were able to take that. Yes, it went to 5, and yes, it was close, but that's G2. It's not like they just beat some pushover team. They were definitely pushed to their limits, but they came out on top, and so they've got a lot of momentum right now. Vitality has momentum as well. It's just not going to be as direct as what Mad Lions is coming off of with their recent loss, but Vitality definitely going to be the favorites, I think, for a lot of people in this series, but not worth writing off Mad, especially with what they did in winter as well. So let's go ahead and talk about it. Of course, on this channel, we go game by game, talking about the advantages and the disadvantages that both teams were able to generate, and that means we get to start with game number 1, and the winner of game number 1 was Mad Lions. They are able to take the first game of the series. They're able to go up 1-0 here, and I talk about this all the time. Momentum is so crucial in series like this, and Mad to be able to come out and, quite frankly, dominate this game number 1, be able to grab that momentum, build off of taking down your winter champions, a team that is already locked in for MSI, and, kind of build off of that, come in here to play Vitality and take that first game. That's absolutely massive, and again, to do it in the way that they did, super duper impressive stuff. They had much better macro this game. We'll get into that. They were mechanically outplaying them at basically every single position. It was just pretty much everything you could have wanted to see out of Mad, and basically the opposite for Vitality. This was a pretty poor performance in game number 1. You don't want to say that, like, game number 1 is too important, because, again, you can always bounce back. You can always make the series interesting, but you certainly wanted to see a little bit more out of Vitality. That I will definitely say. But what ended up happening in the game? Well, let's go over it. Really good early game from Mad. They do kind of create a lot of pressure on their own. We'll get to the mid lane kind of carnage in a bit once we get closer to that 10-minute mark. But, there is a nice double kill in the early game for Nisqy on this Ahri. Nisqy was stellar. Absolutely sensational in this game. The scoreline looks really good. He might have played even better than that scoreline. The dude couldn't miss a charm to save his life. But Vitality gets invaded early Bo on the Maokai is very slow on the clear. It doesn't feel like he's super comfortable on this champion. At least he's not clearing optimally. It doesn't feel like he's practiced a lot on the Maokai, and he gets caught out in his own jungle by Mad Lions. He's able to be taken down, and it's a double kill because Perks ends up falling as well. And from that moment on, Mad just kind of controls the early game. Yes, they trade 1-for-1 in the mid lane again, but that's when it really leads us into the absolute disaster that was the mid game, or the early mid game here for Vitality, where Perks just got ganked over and over and over and over again by one person, by two people, by three people, 4v1, whatever you want to say. The dude was not playing a 1v1 in the mid lane, and it really worked for Mad Lions. It was really consistent to be able to pick up kills. Perks was usually not even pushed all that far forward. He was just getting dove under tower over and over and over again, and I would feel so miserable, but Mad Lions is able to generate a massive lead from this. Elyoya's got gold on the Vi to be able to scale in. Niski's got a ton of gold on the Ahri. He's got like 20 stacks on Magi's by 20 minutes into the game. I mean, he's ridiculously strong, and Mad just has to kind of carry this into the late game. Jungle mid was so strong in the early game that they just have to be able to not throw. They have to be able to not mess it up, and big shock, they don't mess it up. They win a big Herald fight like at 15-ish minutes. They get the ace. And, from that point onwards, it's just over. There's not a lot that Vitality is actually going to be able to do in that one. They end up getting Inhibitor, bottom Inhibitor at 19 minutes into the game. They get Baron as it spawns at 20 minutes. They win another fight. It's basically like a 10, 11, 12k gold lead at 20 minutes. I mean, it is absolutely brutal. And then they don't want to force it. They do play it a little bit calm and collected. They wait until that second Baron for them to push into that base and take the game, but there's really not a lot of plays to point out individually here other than the ones that Niski made on the Ahri, but we'll get to that in a second. This was just an absolute slaughter from Mad. Niski is going to get player of the game. This is an absolute no-brainer. He was awesome in this one. This is his best Ahri game ever. Like, yeah, as someone who's watched a lot of LCS and LEC, go back to Splice, I don't care. Go back to C9, I don't care. On this Mad Lions team, on Fnatic, wherever he's been, this is the best Ahri game. He was a meme in the community for a while with the zoning Ahri charms. Not in this one, dude. He was ridiculous. He was so aggressive. He was doing so much damage, and he just absolutely wrecked Vitality on his own. Obviously, he had a lot of help. There was a really, really good jungler in this game on his team that helped him out a lot, but him being able to set up a lot of those plays and just basically having a point-and-click charm, I mean, you would have thought he was Knight out there with how well he was playing this one. Super well-deserved player of the game, but also big shout-out to Elyoya, who, again, played really, really well. Those are the two that have always been able to step up for Mad. When this team wins, it's often because those two are playing at their peak level, because really, when they're at their peak level, they're some of the best players in the entire league. Full stop. Niski has proven that in the mid lane. Elyoya has proven that in the jungle, and both of them were great in this game one. Hillsang was also great. He was roaming around the map. He was mid lane a bunch as well, and so credit to him. Chasey was fine in the top lane on this, counter pick matchup, and then Carzzy was fine in the bot lane. Just had to not mess up. That was really his job. He was aggressive in the back half of team fights, but they were so far ahead at that point that he really could afford to be, and so Mad just playing really, really well. Jungle mid looking sensational. As for Vitality, miserable game number one. I mean, jungle mid just got completely outplayed. Pretty much everybody's going to give dud of the game to Perks here, and I get why, because the dude got punished, and he was the one who did give most of the gold over to Mad, but I have to give it to Bo. I simply have to give it to Bo. First of all, he doesn't know how to play Maokai. Like, it is very clear that it is just not a champion that he is super comfortable on, and if he's not comfortable on it, I don't care how strong the pick is. You cannot play it in the playoffs. It's just not something that I think they can go back to in this series, but even outside of that, the macro from Bo this game was atrocious. I mean, your mid laner is getting dove, 4-man dove under tower over and over and over and over again, and the dude is just nowhere to be found. He had completely left Perks out to dry. So yes, a lot of people are going to give Perks out of the game, and he deserves it because he wasn't very good, but Bo just kind of leaving him to die over and over again was worse. Like, Perks was bad, Bo was worse, in my opinion, and both of them deserve to get dud of the game here in game number one. Photon got counterpicked in the top lane and had zero impact. Upset and Kaiser were dealing damage towards the back half of the game. Upset trying to salvage some of these team fights, but really, it was just never going to be enough. With how strong the enemy jungle mid was, there was no turning this game around, but huge win for Mad, especially the way that they did it in game number one. Hopefully, they're going to be able to carry that momentum over to game two, but if you're a Vitality fan, you're going to need to see some bounce back here. You certainly don't want to go down 0-2 against a team like Mad Lions currently with the momentum that they've been able to generate over the past few games. So are they going to be able to do it, or is Mad going to take a commanding 2-0 series lead? Well, the winner of game number two was Team Vitality, they are able to take game number 2. They're able to tie up the series at 1 apiece, and this was kind of a must-win, I would say, for Vitality. You certainly didn't want to fall behind 0-2 in this series. That was going to put you in a pretty difficult spot to get out of, but being able to tie up the series at 1-1, you can kind of overlook how game 1 went, especially because somehow game 2 was shorter and arguably more dominant. I don't think it was more dominant overall. I think Mad had more moments in this game than Vitality had in game 1, but you know, we got it. This is the Perks revenge game. We will talk about it, but man, you know, Perks gets a lot of shit on the internet. I'll say that. Every single website that you go to that talks about, you know, the LEC, you're gonna see someone saying Perks is washed. I think I saw a comment on the game 1 where it was like, he wouldn't even survive in a minor region. Like, there are so many people out there that just kind of have the audacity and clearly don't watch all the games that Vitality plays, and they just kind of assume that Perks isn't very good. Obviously, that's not the case, and this is kind of Perks proving that, again, as he's done a lot over the course of the season, if we're being entirely honest. But what ended up happening? How did we get there? What did Perks do to get Vitality this win? Well, actually, pretty good early game from Vitality. We're actually looking at like a 2K gold lead almost exclusively just off of pressure through the first 6 minutes of the game. The first blood was kind of weird. Chasey gets baited into the first blood. It was actually a really nice gank from Bo. Really good timing from him and Photon to be able to set that up. But Elyoya does a great job to turn it around and make it a 1-for-1 and actually walk out and survive, like basically on a sliver of HP. So not a huge lead in the top lane, but for the next 5 or so minutes, we're just looking at these teams kind of scaling up until we get to the big first Herald fight, which is really where things kind of start to change. Vitality is able to win that fight pretty handily, even though Carzzy is able to get a kill on a long-range Jinx rocket from the bot lane, but outside of that, Vitality is really able to clean that up, and that's where their lead really starts, and it's really when they took control of the game. Now, Mad actually answers relatively well. A nice double kill in the bot lane from Mad, which is really good. Good answer from them, but just not a lot that they can do here. Vitality has a lot of pressure on the map, and Bo, in general, is just playing this game much better. I was super critical of his Maokai in game number 1, but he was a lot better on the pick here in game number 2. Going into the mid-game, Vitality definitely looked like they had the game, like, in their own hands. I will give Mad credit. I do think they team fought relatively well, especially in that fight right before third Drake, but they get a little bit overconfident, and they go to start that third Drake, they get collapsed upon, they get basically aced, and Vitality's just got full control from that point in the game. The Tristan is ridiculously strong, the Rumble has gold at that point, and the Aphelios is getting online, and so there's really not going to be a lot of tools, unless Vitality just has really poor macro towards the back half of the game, which, big surprise, they don't. This is really where Perk starts to, like, take over. We're talking about solo killing Chasey in a fight in the bot lane, while Vitality absolutely destroys a fight in enemy jungle on the top side to get a full ace in multiple parts of the map. We're talking about a legit 2v1 from Perks on Elyoya and Niski, and just wins it by himself. It's not like a kind of 2v1. It is both from full health. Perks from full health just 2v1s them. He just runs them down and kills them both, and it's absurd. Like, he is so ridiculously strong at this point. And then, honestly, I thought this game was going to take a little bit longer, not because I think Vitality was in any position to not win this game, but rather because, typically speaking, you want to play this endgame relatively slow. You don't feel like you need to force it with things like the Rumble, the Maokai, the Aphelios. You've got a lot of tools to be able to win team fights. You don't really need to force the game, but Vitality go for it. They do force down top lane, and they're just like, screw it, we're going to go for the end. And they're able to win the fight in the base, and they're able to close out the game, which I think some other teams probably wouldn't have done, but I'm not going to complain too much for Vitality being too aggressive. That's the good part of them. That's the part that I do want to see a little bit more. Maybe just not the inty parts that Bo ends up running into sometimes. Perks in that same vein. I'm not going to pretend like he's a perfect player, but this was a really good game too from Vitality. Basically everything that we wanted to see out of this team we got here. Most specifically, Perks just absolutely popping off. Easy choice for player of the game. The 10-1 and 6 again does not even come close to how good he was in this game. Double-digit kills in back-to-back games for the mid laners, taking turns popping off. You love to see it. They both had relatively bad games in their losses, but the wins were really fun. And if this is the Perks you're going to get the rest of the series, Vitality's actually in a pretty good position, even after losing that game number 1. Bo and Perks are definitely the barometer for Vitality. They always have been, and they always will be. If Bo has a good early game and he just survives and they can get to that point where they can get Perks online, usually it's a pretty good game for them. And, you know, if Perks doesn't completely run it down, if he doesn't get completely trolled in the mid lane and get dove over and over again, then he's also probably going to do well. He's been relatively consistent so long as he hasn't been, like, the major point of focus for the enemy team's pressure, which it's kind of insane. Like, enemy jungle proximity on Perks, like, the number on that is absurd. He is by far the highest in any major region. It's actually crazy how much teams pump into him. in terms of trying to shut him down. But, you know, when you leave him to his own devices, he's still pretty good, and this was a good game overall. Upset and Kaiser were good. Upset had a really good fight in that jungle fight that I kind of talked about where Perks was isolated. That Aphelios ult went absolutely nutty, and he Gale forces in to get some executions. That's the kind of Upset I want to see, someone who's willing to go and try and make those plays. He's been a little bit more passive on this team than I think I would like, but you know, it's okay. He's never been the most aggressive AD carry player, and, you know, I don't think he's not made any mistakes. I think he's been solid, and then Kaiser was good as well. Photon was solid on the Rumble, some really good ultimates, and so just a lot of positives, I would say, for Vitality in this one. As for Mad on the other side, certainly not the game you were looking for, I would say, after that really strong game number 1 win, but you're not going to freak out. You're not going to panic. You still are only, you know, tied in this series at the very worst, but you got a lot of the picks that I think you've done really well on over the course of the split. Most notably, obviously, the Jace for Chasey, easily his best champion, and then the Jinx for Carzzy, 2 picks that I think have been very successful for Mad Lions over the course of the season so far, just not necessarily working out in this one. Dud of the game is going to go to Niski. I think some people want to give it to Elyoya, some people want to give it to Chasey, some people want to give it to Hylissang. For me, Niski getting outclassed in the mid lane was the most noticeable. Love Niski as a player. I think he's still incredibly underrated, but not exactly the best game that he has played. Sylas into Triss can actually be a relatively difficult matchup if you're not ahead, and Niski got behind way too early in this game and really couldn't play at all. The survivability and the drain tankiness, even the assassination potential of that Sylas pick really falls off if the champion is super far behind in gold, like he was in this game. But the series is far from over. It's only tied up at 1 apiece now. Whoever wins this game 3 is going to be taking control of this series, and it's going to make it a lot easier for them to finish it out. You want to only have to win 1 of the last 2 and not both of the last 2 to be able to win this series. So who's going to be able to take that game number 3? Well, the winner of game number 3 was Mad Lions. They are able to take game number 3. They're able to move up into this series 2-1, and this is a really big win for them. They really wanted to get back onto the board. Game 2 obviously not going exactly how they wanted it to, but regaining control of this series with a really nice win here in game number 3. And this is just kind of the example of what I was talking about in game number 1, where it really does feel like Mad Lions is just the better team, where you could argue Vitality has more talented players, even though that hasn't necessarily always been the case across this series, but they certainly don't play together in the same way that Mad Lions plays together. It feels like they're really smart in terms of the macro decisions that they want to make, and they're very aggressive in terms of trying to generate those early leads. They knew that getting that Lee Sin rocking and rolling was going to be absolutely massive for them, and so they did. And let me tell you, this Lee Sin, pretty darn good this game. I will definitely say that. Elyoya putting on a little bit of a clinic. But let's go ahead and talk about what happened. Really good early game for Mad Lions. The best way I can describe it is Elyoya is everywhere. He is everywhere on the map. I mean, we're talking about, you know, a dive mid that he ends up countering because Bo and Perks didn't set it up correctly, and so he ends up getting a 2-for-1 kill in the mid lane. They end up 3-manning Perks, and then all of a sudden they go top for a kill, and then all of a sudden they go bot for a kill, and it's like, Elyoya is just everywhere on the map, creating so much pressure for Mad Lions, and Bo is just not doing anything, and I talk about this a lot with Vi. You gotta push the tempo, you gotta push the pressure. I know that probably in the locker room they were telling Bo, like, hey, you know, usually if you don't int before 5-6 minutes into the game, we usually win. We can usually kind of transition into the mid game at least a little bit more efficiently, so long as we're not super far behind. But I think he took the being passive and not making mistakes in the early game a little too literally, and ended up just not being useful at all. Elyoya jungled circles around him at the start of this game and created so much on the side of Mad Lions that, honestly, it was a pretty easy mid-game transition from them, which they did go ahead and make. Now, Vitality does try to make some plays in the mid-game, which is good. At least they're not just sitting there and losing, but Mad Lions is just one step ahead of all of them. They counter-gank pretty much every single time Vitality goes for any sort of big play, and they do a really good job making sure that the lead that they were able to generate in the early game is for real, that it's able to stick around, and then, you know, by the time we hit the late game, they really are strong, and obviously Vitality knows it, but it's pretty inexcusable. You'll see the Baron number on the side of Mad is 3, and that's not a particularly bad stat in isolation, but all 3, and I mean all 3 of those Barons were completely free. They didn't have to give up anything for them. They just walked into Baron Pit and took it, and that is just unacceptable. Like, that kind of macro decision towards the back half of the game is just not acceptable. I don't really care what the reasoning is behind why that ended up happening. The fact that it happened is atrocious, and Mad Lions ends up basically cruising to a victory because Vitality just kind of lets them have everything that they want towards the back half of this game. Credit to Upset and Kaiser. I actually do think they played well in some of these fights, most notably a big fight that Vitality actually won in the bot lane around, 30-ish minutes into the game, but everything else outside of that was pretty disastrous. For Mad, I mean, you're going to be happy, right? You got everything you wanted. Great early game from my player of the game here in Elyoya in the jungle. Pretty clear that Elyoya is better than Bo. I think we can definitely say that with pretty big certainty at this point after the first couple of games of this series. Elyoya is just perennially underrated, and he has been all year long. I had him as my #1 jungler in the league, both in the winter preseason and in the spring preseason. In both splits, going into the split, I had him as the #1 jungler in the LEC, and he is clearly proving me right in a series like this, where yes, Bo is incredibly talented and a really good player, but the consistency is just absolutely not there. Elyoya is going to be that guy that you can trust to step up in basically every influential best of 5 like he has all year long. A phenomenal Lee Sin game. I didn't even talk about the final fight of the game, which was just one of the most goated kicks that I've seen in a while. This was a superstar level kick. He's on the flank in the mid lane as Mad Lions try to rush it down to close the game. He ends up landing it onto Upset to kick him right into the rest of Mad, and they're able to end the game really, really, really quickly off of that. So Elyoya, phenomenal game here. I thought Karzi and Hilly were also pretty good. Chasey made some good plays. Took him forever to die in almost any circumstance. He was basically invincible this game, which is always fun. You know, it's always fun to see a champion like Cassante that can deal a ridiculous amount of damage, has incredible mobility, and also never dies. Really, really fun job from you, Riot. Only player that I don't think was necessarily perfect this game was Niski in the mid lane. And I don't even think he was bad. He was just super far down in lane. Perks was up a ridiculous amount in the laning phase, and Vitality just didn't want to do anything with it. And so Niski was down, but he ended up roaming a lot, making plays the rest of the map, you know, moving top lane to get a kill for Chasey, etc., that kind of stuff, being useful in the late game team fights. Lissandra ultimate is pretty much always going to be good, and that was really the only negative I guess I could give Mad Lions. Maybe that fight in the bot lane, but outside of that, just good stuff coming out from this team. And then for Vitality on the other side, God, like, the macro is just miserable. Bo's gonna get my dud of the game, and it's more than just his gameplay. He just does not seem to have a good understanding of how to play from behind. Like, as a player, he changes so much when he gets to play from ahead. Just the plays that he ends up making, and I'm not blaming the entirety of the macro problems of Vitality onto Bo. I'm not naive enough to say that it's only the jungler's fault when the macro is bad, but Bo is so noticeably different when he has to play from behind. Like, even more so than someone like Malrang, Bo just does not play with any sort of ferocity and aggression from behind. He just kind of lets the game end, and it's really frustrating to watch, and that's kind of what we got in this one, not to mention the fact that he had to be Vi in a late game where he wasn't ahead, and he just got blown up basically instantly anytime he tried to ult anybody. But, you know, negatives in a lot of different areas. Photon was not very good this game. The kicks were actually super influential. They were able to kick Kennen out of a lot of these fights, and so as soon as he would pop ultimate, he would immediately be kicked basically to his own backline, and he wouldn't be able to re-engage. Upset and Kaiser were pretty good, and Perks was good in lane, but there really isn't all that much that they were going to be able to do. The game was just so far behind by the time the Aphelios was able to get online, and Syndra certainly isn't going to be able to win the game by herself. Just not a good game from Vitality. This exposes their biggest problem, which is communication and teamwork, which they just don't have. They are a bunch of individual players, not a team, but hopefully they can turn it around because they're currently on split point. If they lose this game number 4, they are eliminated and Mad Lions is moving on to the finals. But of course, if they win it, we're going to be moving on to a Silver Scrapes game number 5. So are we going to be getting that game 5, or is Mad Lions going to close it out? Well, the winner of game number 4 was Mad Lions. They are able to take game number 4. They're able to take the series 3-1. And they're moving on to the Spring Split LEC Finals. Incredibly excited for this team. Everybody counted them out. Well, everybody with the exception of me counted them out. Not to, you know, I'm not trying to toot my own horn a little bit. I definitely counted them out a little bit. But I've been pretty high on this team ever since the group stage. I knew that they were a lot better than people were giving them credit for. I have very vocally stood up against this idea that this team doesn't deserve to go to MSI. I was very, very vocal about, you know, it's pretty impressive that they are one of 2 teams to make top 4 in both splits, and they're the only team, definitely, to make finals in both splits. That's a pretty damn good accomplishment for Mad Lions. They have played more games than any other team in Europe by a considerable margin across 2023, and it's not going to end here. Obviously, that final series we're still going to discuss a little bit later, but huge win from them in Game 4 to close it out, and they looked really, really good in this one. So what ended up happening? Well, it's this pretty small lead early. You know, in all 3 of the other games, I would say that kind of started this series off. Somebody made their mark pretty early on in the game. Mad in games 1 and 3, Vitality in game 2. But game 4, definitely a little bit more back and forth. There was a really good gank from Elyoya top lane to save Chasey. Photon coming very close to being able to pick up first blood by himself up in that top lane, but a really good kind of saving gank there from Elyoya to keep that top lane at least a little bit in check. And then it's actually the first Drake fight that ends up going in the way of Vitality, and it's a pretty good fight. They were only able to pick up 1 kill. They came very close to being able to pick up more, but unfortunately, they just weren't able to get a big enough lead. Mad continues to try and focus top lane. They want to get this Kennen ahead. They know there aren't a lot of tools on the side of Vitality to really stop this Kennen. You don't have a Lee Sin like Mad Lions had in game number 3 to be able to kind of displace him, and so if you can get that Kennen ahead, it's going to be a little bit of a problem. Spoiler alert, it ends up being a little bit of a problem for Vitality to end up having to deal with, but I would say a relatively good early game for Mad. They get a small lead. Now, where they really start to extend their lead is a lot of the really risky plays they start going for in the mid game, most notably around this second dragon. They go really aggressive after picking up the Drake. They go all in the enemy jungle, trying to force a play. They end up only trading 1 for 1 because they did get a little bit over aggressive, but those kinds of plays, they end up making a lot throughout the mid game. A couple of times it doesn't work. Niski gets caught out in the side lane, just not really understanding where Vitality is going to be on the map, but for the most part, they're actually able to generate a nice 3-4k lead in the mid game here, which is really strong considering they're not making, you know, like gigantic, you know, 5v5 plays, right? They're just kind of slowly chipping away at the gold lead, being able to get towers, being able to get objectives, and just kind of pushing the game forward. It does get caught a little bit here. A nice 17-minute fight for Vitality. Rumble ultimates are really, really hard to deal with. And Photon actually had a couple of really good ones in this game. That was really Vitality's kind of way of trying to fight back into this game. If they had some good Maokai ultimates, and then if Rumble could drop that ultimate on top of a couple of people, they could still win fights, even from, you know, 3, 4, 5k behind. And, you know, that was keeping them in the game for a bit, but unfortunately, it all ends up kind of going bottoms up, I guess you could say, at the Baron fight. And you know, you can give a lot of credit to a lot of different places for this one, but you got to shout out that Kennen. You know, I prefaced it a bit, that Kennen was going to be a little bit of a problem. Well, the Kennen was a bit of a problem in that Baron fight. He ends up going in, he gets that ult on 4 people, and the fight's over. I mean, he absolutely shreds the entirety of Vitality. Kaiser has to eat Bow in order to stop him from dying, because he needs to be the tank, he needs to be the front line, but that means Upset gets absolutely deleted, Perks gets absolutely deleted, Photon gets absolutely deleted, and there's just no winning that fight. Mad Lions gets basically like a 10k gold lead off of that. They get the Baron, they get the fight, they're able to get a bunch of towers. And while they do play it relatively slow to close out the game, they kind of posture around, they know they have a ridiculous amount of poke, they know they just need to wait for cooldowns. They are able to close it out, they're able to win the fight in the base, and they're able to end Vitality's split right then and there. So credit to Mad. Player of the game, obviously going to go to Chasey. To me, it really couldn't go to anybody else. He was really good in this one on the Kennen. He was just good in this series in general. Player of the series for me is not going to go to Chasey, but he was still really, really good on the Kennen. Player of the series for me, it's going to go to Elyoya in the jungle. Incredibly good performance, basically the entire series from him. The only game that wasn't so good was game 2, but even then, like, that was more so the rest of the team just not being all that great. Like, he didn't make any gigantic errors himself, but that game 3 on the Lee Sin definitely stands out. And he was really good in this game 4 on the Vi as well. Very interesting that in these 3 games, 3 different player of the games for Mad Lions. Chasey in game 3, Chasey in game 4, Elyoya in game 3, and Niski in game number 1. And so everybody on Mad really stepping up. Carzzy and Hilly took a little bit of a back seat. This definitely reminded me a lot more of Winter Mad Lions, and that's not a bad thing. I think this is a really good series. This team is playing some of the best League of Legends that they have played all year long, and it's a pretty good time to do that. They've only got 1 more series to go in order to call themselves champions and to head to MSI in a place that I think a lot of people were going to be mad if they hit it. I don't think a lot of people can be mad. Pun was not intended at first, but it was intended the second time, if they end up getting there now. As for Vitality, sucky way to end the split. You weren't able to win a single best of 5. That's got to definitely weigh on you. You only won 1 game in any of your best of 5s. You went 1-6 across your 2 series, with the BDS series being an 0-3 and this one being a 1-3. And so not exactly a great look for a team that not a lot of people really believe in. They did look good in group stage, and obviously, you know, 5th to 3rd is an improvement from Winter, but a lot of the core problems that I think a lot of people were hoping that bringing in a player like Upset and just getting these players more time to gel together would solve, me included, have just not not been solved. A lot of the mistakes, a lot of the communication errors, they're just super present. Bo's gonna get done of the game, and quite frankly, Bo was a disaster this series. This was a really bad series from him, and this is not the first time this has happened. He is hit or miss, but it's quite frankly been a lot of misses in games that are super important. It's definitely something to be concerned about, but, you know, Perks I thought was relatively okay in this series outside of game number 1. Upset and Kaiser were definitely the best performing members of Vitality across the series. There's just only so much that they can do, and then Photon had some good ults in this game, but outside of that, I would say Chasey was definitely the better top laner in this series. Vitality definitely worries me a bit. I have no idea what to think of this team, because at their best, they're arguably the best team in Europe, and the team that I think you're looking at that has the highest ceiling, potentially, of any team in the LEC, but at their lowest, like their floor, it's just not very good, and the consistency, the space between those two really, really worries me. Hopefully they can figure out some of those communication errors. I really don't know what the solution to that is. Hopefully, you know, at the beginning of the season, we thought that playing together, just getting time to be together would kind of solve a lot of that. It really hasn't up until this point, so hopefully you can figure something out going into summer, because we all want to see this team get on the same page. It's just not really been there. But congratulations to Mad. They're moving on to the finals to face BDS, and what is a series I don't think a lot of people saw coming, and I'm really, really happy and excited for this team, and I'm glad they really are proving all the doubters wrong. Alright, but that is going to do it for my LEC Spring Split Semifinals overview and analysis. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Again, I'm sorry this is coming out a little bit late. I'm sorry the finals video is coming out a little bit late, but, you know, IRL stuff got a little bit in the way. I do hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, let me know down in the comments section below. I would ask who you guys you think is going to win the finals, but obviously if you're watching this, you probably already know. But let me know down in the comment section below what you guys thought of the video, what you guys think of the format, and what you guys are excited for MSI. Obviously, we're getting real close to that, and so excited to hear you guys' thoughts and opinions on that kind of stuff. Of course, if you did enjoy the video, hit that like button. It really does mean a lot to me. It lets me know you guys are enjoying the content. Also, it helps get this video out to a lot more people, and so I'm really appreciative of that. And then, of course, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. I'm posting a lot of content. Obviously, we just went through every single major region's playoffs, and with MSI right around the corner, you're not going to miss a lot of the, you're not going to want to miss a lot of the pre-MSI and during MSI analysis that I'm going to be doing. But with all that being said, I hope you all are having a great day. I hope you continue to have a great day, and I will see you all later.